to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Bill Seaver, thanks for coming by.
Hey, thank you very much.
So Chris Thomas was on last week, I think it was.
Caught me in mid-sip.
Go ahead, man. You got all the time in the world here.
Go ahead.
No,
you're clearly in charge here, and I'm not.
You can have as many sips as you want. One of the great things about getting a busy guy like you on the podcast is you can just sit down a little bit and drink some coffee. But like with Chris Thomas, what I told him is basically now we're at the point where to see my friends, I have to get them back on the podcast. Because I think I haven't seen you in quite some time.
Yeah, we can change that, but
there's probably other ways.
Air.
But
yes.
Hey, the last time you were on the podcast, I think you were episode 9 on the first Kent Lapp podcast.
Yes, the first go around.
February of 2017.
Was that when it was?
That's
okay.
3.5 years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah. Time goes really fast. And let me ask you this, Bill.
A lot has changed since then.
Your parting advice, because I was looking at my notes, and one of the interesting things, Andrew, that I used to do back then is I had a legal notepad, and from your podcast, I kid you not, I had 3 pages of handwritten notes. I must have just been like writing furiously as we were talking.
I don't remember you looking at me one time that whole...
Really?
No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, if you took
hopefully
3 pages
you don't remember that. But yeah, I was a furious note taker, which I'm not doing that because I feel like this is more conversational, and I'll go back and listen to it if I need to. Anyhow, my point on the notes was your parting advice, which was really good advice, was just keep swimming.
Oh, yes.
Persistence is undervalued. So let me ask you this. Do you still feel the same way, and what have you learned in regards to just keep swimming? Because you've been through some stuff.
That could not be more applicable to the last several years of my life. And about this time last year, I actually got to speak to a class at Vanderbilt, and that was what I left them with, was the Finding Nemo, just keep swimming.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and gee whiz, who knew a year ago? I mean, here we are in late October, 2020, and COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And for me and for my work, and I guess we'll get into this, is this the tornado that hit our business this year, and then even going back to a year. So it was February of 2017.
Yep.
I completely walked away from what I had been doing for 11 years in February of 2018. So exactly a year after that podcast interview,
yep, I
flipped over to a completely different thing from having been self-employed for 11 years.
Is that when you joined Techno-Aide?
That is.
February of 18. So you've been there 2.5 years.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And did they hire you as president, or did you kind of work your way up there?
No, they hired me as president, and so the way I tell it is, Techno-Aide had been a client of mine over the years, and for several years I had worked with them. They actually had a sub brand, which is specifically what I worked with them on, called Updesk. So it's an adjustable height desk company. And Techno-Aide is not in the Updesk business anymore, but they were at that point in time.
Yep.
Or in 2012 is when Updesk launched. And so from 2012 through 2014, I worked with them, and then a little bit off and on. And in December of 2017, it was following what was a pretty rough up and down season of self-employment. And as a self-employed guy, at that point, that was 11 years. I remember having on many occasions talked to my wife, and early on I just had to tell her, you're on this journey with me. You're on the self-employed journey with me. My wife is and was a stay-at-home mom. Now she has launched her own business. We can talk about that later. She's a personal organizer, and so she's organizing homes across Nashville now.
What's it called?
Seaver Organizing Company.
Seaver, Seaver. Seaver Organizing Company.
Yes.
People can just Google it, but it's just Nashville.
It is in the Nashville area. Although she's doing virtual now because
cool. So anyone listening to this could get in on that.
She's had people around the U.S. reach out to her.
Very cool.
So until recently, and through our entire almost 20 years of marriage now, she has been a stay-at-home mom, and which is particularly stressful when your husband's and your family sole income is coming through whatever work you get. And so I had always talked to her about how she had a veto card and that she could shut it down.
I remember we talked
at
about
any
this
point,
last time too.
and
yeah.
if she wanted to get off the crazy train, just say, "Hey, I can't take it anymore," because it is a lot of up and down. Self-employment is a lot of roller coaster. You can have some high highs and some very low lows, and the momentum shift from one to the other can sometimes be very dramatic. And if you don't have the stomach for it, it is just truly not for everyone.
Yeah.
And she was able to hang in there for many, many years, and we saw some high highs, we saw some low lows, and by, I would say, late summer of 2017, she was. I saw her kind of reaching for that veto card in her pocket, kind of reaching around for it. I was like, "Uh-oh, here it comes." And frankly, I thought, I think I'm with her. I think it's just maybe time to do something else. And so that whole fall of 2017 was really about trying to figure out what can I do? What does it look like to not be self-employed after this long? And how marketable am I? Like, what kind of resume does a self-employed person who's been consulting a bunch of businesses? Like, on the one hand, it was really good, but what became very apparent as well is that the things that people were looking for to hire on as a full-time employee were not consistent with my background, because it seemed a little bit too project oriented, and it was very like, well, what does he actually do? What did
Sure.
When it comes to resumes, people want something very safe and sort of reliable and secure. And I think I seemed too risky to most people.
Sure.
And maybe I am. And so, kind of where she finally played the veto card, and I said, "Hey, honey, I'm with you. So you're playing it. I'm ready." There was no argument. There was no fight. It was just like, "Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's figure out what's next." So to just keep swimming and let's be persistent with the right attitude. I mean, you can be persistent and begrudgingly move forward through your days and frankly drag everybody down with you.
Yes, for sure. Well, I was going to ask, if she sort of played that veto card, did you sort of begrudge her the fact that she did that? Or it sounded like you were pretty well on board with it as well.
I was at that point in time, I was ready. Had she done it 6 months earlier, I don't think I would have been as receptive.
Okay.
And so the providential timing of all of that, I think, of just me being prepared for it, me coming to terms with some things, frankly, probably letting some dreams die or just killing them off, putting them out of their misery.
Yeah.
I think all of that just kind of came together over that period where I could tell for all of 2017, she and I were kind of on the fence of like, how's this whole employment thing really going to work? And so 2017 was truly a kind of a final test year.
I see. Okay. Well, I wanted to ask about the dreams too, and you just mentioned it. So, you were self-employed for quite a long time, and you were into various things, and you were sort of, I guess in some respects, at least with some of the things, right? You were following your dream, right? I mean, that's why you were self-employed and doing your own thing. And it's tough to kind of view that as a straight trade-off, right? Because it's not like I hope it's not like you killed all your dreams. You just have to go make a little bit of money and you hate what you do. And, all of your hopes and dreams for your life, you just have to like kill or put on pause. I mean, I hope it's not like that, but also there is a reality to sometimes that the hopes and dreams that you have, if they aren't working out as you hoped or expected, or those types of things where you do need to make a change and I guess I don't know, how would you put it? Accept a new reality? How did you think through that?
Yeah, so there is certainly a new reality that becomes necessary. And I think as the husband, father of four, having seen my wife defer to me in things I wanted for a very long time, I was willing to do something I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Because it seemed as if she had put up with a lot. She had put up with riding that roller coaster for over a decade. And so if it meant knowing that she likes stability more than I do, if that meant that knowing that she needed things to cool off for a bit, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever that was going to look like, I was willing to do that and be a provider rather than be a dream chaser. Mm-hmm. Sometimes those things overlap, and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
and it's great. And so a lot of the things you read and a lot of the stuff that you would hear people talk about is you can be both a provider and a dream chaser simultaneously, except when you can't.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do if you can't do both? And you have to choose. And so for me, I felt like I had been able to chase a dream, chase multiple dreams, try a lot of different things vocationally, and through the self-employed years, and be a provider. But as the provision was beginning to wane and get tougher and progressively tougher, and not just for a month and not just for a couple months, like for that to continue to go, like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
For that to continue, I just had to just decide, like, am I going to keep pushing this? Particularly when I would say too, I don't know that my dream was as clear at that point anymore.
I see.
And
Okay.
so I can't say that I had some vivid thing that I was pursuing,
Yeah.
because that's where it gets really tough.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a very clear thing that you want and that you're pursuing, and yet the provision seems to be separate from that.
Yes.
So that's when you have the starkest difference, or the starkest just sort of variance between the two realities.
Yes.
For me, in this particular case, and thankfully, I think the dream had faded a lot. I had been and done a whole lot of things. I'd been a lot of places. I'd done a lot of things. And I was like, I've kind of done, this is an 11-year run on trying to do something that I didn't know if I'd get 12 months out of it.
Sure.
So I was able to stretch what was a 1-year try into 11.
Mm-hmm.
I felt pretty good about that. And
Yeah.
I was certainly willing to just shift into provision mode.
Okay. So were you able to find something that you can do with your time, work with your hands and your mind and so forth, that does provide, and yet have you found there are aspects of that maybe you didn't even see going in, but now that you're doing it for a year or two, is there aspects of that you can incorporate some of those dreams, or some of the, what am I looking for here? Some of the character traits, not even character traits, some of the things that play on the traits that played on the dreams in the past. Maybe it's not actually doing it, but you're pulling it into your work now. You see what I'm saying?
Sure. So when I first went out on my own, I was most interested in, one, can I even stand on my own 2 feet? What does that even look like? I was looking for a sense of freedom. I was looking for a scenario where I could sort of be free from some of the corporate bureaucracy that I had experienced. I worked in a situation where I didn't truly have the most respect in the world for the individual I worked for. And so a lot of those things kind of shaped where I was when I was ready to kind of go out on my own. And I thought there was this whole thing of social media and digital marketing that was coming in back in 2006 and 2007 when I was getting started. And I wanted to see if there was something real there. Well, clearly there was. Just ask our president. Clearly, I ask all the previous presidents in the last decade plus, right?
Yeah.
So that was real. So it was kind of, I got to chase that and see it all the way through from the rise to the plateau to the normalization. I got to play all that out. And so the dream was that, and the dream was evolving through that time. But what I was ready to do in many respects was, in fact, I think in 2017, when you and I talked, I was already shifting into how I could help companies at a broader level.
You were, I remember that.
And so that was a lot of where I was less specific at that point on talking about digital marketing and social media marketing for sure. Like that had kind of run its course for me specifically. And so the idea to actually go deep with one organization rather than go wide with a number of organizations was very compelling to me.
Yeah.
So that's why I got to sort of, the dream was evolving into how do I impact a business, and maybe can I take some of these lessons I've been learning professionally since I got out of college and see if I can apply that more broadly.
Yeah. I think what I was reaching for is things that you are good at or enjoy back in your kind of prior kind of self-employed dream days, if you will, that now you're incorporating into your work. And I think I'll give you an example. I was on your LinkedIn page, and you are doing some video updates, which is
Right.
really cool.
Yeah.
But not every president does that, and so
Right.
this is, you can do that, and you probably, I'm assuming you enjoy that, and you're good at communication. And that sort of plays on some of your digital marketing days too, a little bit, and social media and your knowledge there. And so like getting that communication out direct to the customers, directly from you, it's very well done. You communicate exceptionally well. Like those are things where now you're president of a manufacturing company, and
Right.
not every president's doing that, but
That's
you
for
are,
sure.
right? Because
Yes.
you're good at it and you enjoy it. Like things like that. Are you noticing some others that?
Well, so every person should bring all of their strengths to bear when they go work someplace. And it would be foolish for me to not bring my past work life with me. And so the fact that I would maybe edit some video or audio or record video or communicate through the written word or the broadcast word or whatever, the fact that I did that during my self-employment years and was pretty comfortable with that, of course, should bleed into, my work now. That's the easy stuff. It was learning the manufacturing business. That was where the challenge was.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so, I'm very much if it's recording a video for the business, it's very much in my element. I'm not uncomfortable with that.
Yeah. And how are you finding those video updates to be received? Is Techno-Aide, we'll get into it, is it business to business primarily? Or is it business to customer? Like, are you selling to hospitals? Or are you selling to...
So the business is historically sold to dealers. So it's a more B2B situation.
Okay. So when you're sending out these video updates about now you're ready to, take orders for personal protective equipment, that type of a thing again, that is to another business primarily, correct?
Yeah, so the company's always had people who have purchased directly from it in some sense, and so I want to talk to everybody, but we talk to a variety of dealers around the country.
Yeah. Okay.
Frankly, around the world.
Yeah.
So it's a global audience that we're trying to reach.
What stood out to me is that you're providing the updates straight from you, and I'm sure the dealers are paying attention to your updates, and some individuals too, but the dealers probably, they're probably more vested as far as when is this coming out, when is it available, those types of things. But what stuck out to me was you're providing these updates directly as opposed to letting your sales staff or your sales guy or your VP of sales know and then let him communicate it out. I assume, there's plenty of that communication as well. But how are you finding these updates direct from you, kind of walking through the plant and so forth? How are you finding that to be received?
Well, so maybe we should back up and talk about why I feel the need to do updates in the first place.
That'd be great.
which is because of the tornado that came through Nashville. So, and let me back up one half step more. So I got this job because in December of 2017, having worked with this company, a gentleman who used to be part of the ownership team at Techno-Aide basically was in town, asked me if I'd get together with him for breakfast one day. And so I went in not really knowing what to expect. And I walked out 2 hours later and I called my wife and I said, I think he wants me to be the president of the company. So I remember walking back to my car here in downtown Nashville. And I just said, hey, I think he wants me to be president of the company. And she said, can you do that? Which is the most reassuring thing you can ask from a wife.
Serious vote of confidence.
And it's like, well, I think I can, but I've got some learning to do. And she's like, well, yeah, you do. And so like, oh, thanks, babe. That all finally got finalized in February of 2018. Mid-February 2018 is when I dove in. And so Techno-Aide is a 40-plus-year-old manufacturing company that's been servicing the medical imaging industry for decades now. It's grown, it's changed ownership several times over the decades, and it was ready for a fresh start, a fresh take on some things. And so the leadership team has been completely overhauled over the last, and specifically in the last year and a half or so, which has been really exciting to see what we can do and keep all of the best from what we used to do as a company, and then really try to upgrade some other places that were needed. So that was all very much well underway. when March 3rd of 2020 came along. And I remember waking up that morning and I heard it was like 5 o'clock in the morning. I heard my phone buzzing, and which doesn't happen, most days. And so I didn't even know we had a tornado come through the night before.
I didn't either.
It wasn't in the forecast that night. I don't know if you remember like this. A lot of times we know tornadoes are coming through here in Nashville, and you kind of get those sleepless nights where you're up kind of wondering, do I need to go take shelter? That was not one of those nights. It was not on my metaphorical radar, nor my literal radar. And so I was just like, what in the world's going on here? And so we have a friend who's a fireman who had been dispatched to that area. And he was texting with our VP of operations, and he said, our firefighter friend is a very direct, kind of non-emotional person. And so I was getting screenshots of the messages between them. And he just said, it was very short, like, your place got hit, it's gone. And like, it was just, and then these grainy photos were, I was like, no. Like, this is, classic, like, there's no way. How does he even know where our building was and any of this? And so there was just instant denial of just like, wait a second, is that real? So over the next couple hours, we did get confirmed that like our entire building just got smashed. We were right near John C. Toon Airport here in Nashville.
Oh, wow.
And so that's right where the tornado first hit in this area. That was the first before it hit that long stretch, all across Middle Tennessee. John C. Toon was a quarter mile away from us. And from what we can tell, we were right in that middle part of the tornado path. And I've never seen anything like it. I never thought I would see anything like that in real life, but to actually go look at that devastation and to see huge cinder block walls that have just fallen in, and to imagine that came along when nobody was expecting it. Yeah. And that it happened at 12:30 a.m. rather than 12:30 p.m. Because had we been there during a workday, there were chairs where people sit that were under mounds of cinder block. And so had that come along at a different time of day, we would have had injured employees. And I shudder to think, if it would have been worse than that. Yep. So that was just one of many, I would just say it ironically, blessings of like we were blessed that nobody was there when that happened. We were blessed that we had started to shift our mindset and our mentality and our culture and our leadership prior to the tornado. Because if we hadn't have started to do that prior to the tornado, I don't think we would be bouncing back as quickly as we have. So here we are, almost 8 months since the tornado. We have a new location. We're almost completely moved in. We're just a few weeks away from our new office build out being completed. We have most of our manufacturing is all back. We're able to do it with better technology, more efficiently than we were before. And so there's just huge upside all over the place. Now that doesn't mean it hasn't been a pain. Right. We've had some very long, hard days. Yep. But going back to, what we originally talked about is that persistent, just keep swimming, having leaders around me and having been able to sort of pick the folks who I'm with, then we can spread this kind of out through the organization. When you're looking at a hole in the ground that used to be your business, the people who you have with you really matter a lot. So when you think about your hiring choices, when you think about those, like when you have people you've got to lean into. And so I feel completely blessed and amazed that we've got the team that we have.
Yeah, because at that point you have your customer base, you have your brand, and you have your people. And the rest is gone. Yes. For context, how many square foot were you in by John C. Toon Airport?
We were in a manufacturing office facility that was, I believe, 45,000 square feet.
Wow, so fairly large. And was this owned or leased?
It was leased.
It was leased. And did insurance... I'm assuming your manufacturing company, your building got blown in, so there's at least, weeks where you're not manufacturing anything?
Yeah, so...
Or months. And did insurance cover this, or how do you weather that?
Well, if you have the right insurance, it can be very helpful. And so I got to... Listen, I have never thought in my life, I would say that I was as thankful for insurance as I am. I would never have thought I would love an insurance guy as much as I love Mike Thomas. Mike, if Mike's listening.
With who? With Mike Thomas?
Mike's his own guy.
Oh, really?
Mike's his own thing.
What's the agency name?
I don't even know what
Mike
Mike's agency name is, because
Okay.
Mike
He's
is
that
like
personal,
he's
huh?
just like he is the insurance cowboy. He'll swoop in and save the day. So he's been great. He helps us with all of our corporate insurance. He made sure that we were well covered years before I ever came along. He'd been around the company. So he helped us out a ton, even through this process. He's helped us out. And so I think that's where the decisions that you make in partners and leaders, in what insurance do you really feel like you should be paying for or shouldn't be paying for?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's when you are staring at a hole in the ground, that's where all of that really, it matters.
For sure.
And so again, there are loads of blessings, within that. And which is a weird thing to say. We were saying that, just my leadership team and me, we were saying that within 24 or 48 hours of the tornado coming through. One of our VP of operations, Aaron, his house became our office for a short period of time.
Oh, wow.
His kitchen table, much to his wife's chagrin, although Mary, his wife, was great. But, it was like that was home base for us for a little bit until we got some temp space.
Yeah.
And we talked, I just remember sitting in his living room, I mean, probably 2 days after the tornado, and our heads are still spinning in many respects, but saying, guys, could this perhaps be the best thing that's ever happened to us? Like, can we use this and not replicate things that we would have wanted to get rid of in the old situation? Lean into the good stuff, change things that we wanted to change. This is a massive catalyst to make change. It lets us shed some cultural baggage. It lets us shed some process baggage, and we're starting fresh, but we know enough to know what not to do.
Yeah.
So let's go. And
where is the building now, and how big?
So we moved into about a 60,000 square foot space over in Whites Creek, Tennessee.
Okay.
So it's just right up I-24. It's about a dozen minutes from downtown Nashville.
Okay, so the people that were driving into the old location and driving into the new location, no one had to lose their job or anything like that. It's not that the distance is far enough away.
The distance works out great.
And that is a great way to look at it, most certainly, because you can't, at that point, you're not going to change whether it happened or not. So you may as well move on, and there's no sense in crying over spilled milk. And of course,
what was great was in talking to some of the ownership team for our company. One of the guys confessed after we were a couple weeks into it. A couple weeks afterwards, he said, "Bill, I knew that we were going to be okay when I realized that you and the rest of the management team wasn't curled up in the fetal position,
right,
in the corner."
Yeah.
And he said, because that's an option.
Yeah.
Now, I would say that was not an option that ever crossed my mind, and that's frankly not an option that ever crossed our management team's mind.
Yeah.
But if you stop and think about it for a second, it is possible that you can assess all of that. You can see all the damage. You can see the work. You can anticipate all the work that's coming, and just close up.
Yeah, most certainly. There was a lady on here a couple weeks ago, Candace Bruder from New York City. She was in downtown New York when 9/11 happened, and she noticed three types of people: people that froze, people that just cried, and people that just got to work, got it done.
Yep.
You have to. You just rise above it. You got to keep swimming. This comes back to your swimming point, which is going to maybe become a little bit of a theme. What were you able to sort of, when you said drop some things culturally, do you just mean it's a new day, it's a new location? Did you drop some product lines at that point? Did you shift some things around HR-wise or brand-wise?
Well, so the culture in the company was one that we'd been wanting to just really warm up since I got there, and we wanted to make sure that there was a high level of trust all the way around. Make sure that there wasn't a culture of just blame and skepticism. And so I think pulling together through hard days, certainly helps people sort of see, hey, we are in this together.
Yes.
And we had done a lot of things to try to fix that and earn trust. Management never gets to stop earning trust. Just because you have a particular title and role within the company does not mean that you immediately get the respect of the employees. In fact, it probably means that you need to work harder to do that. And so we had been working toward, as a management team, had been really working toward what does it look like to earn trust and to earn respect, and do that time after time through good communication, clear communication. Our company was not historically very open and candid in talking to employees about things, and so that's another thing I wanted to do. And so we started doing a year ago. We started doing monthly meetings and just like, what's going on? What's the state of the company? How let's talk about profitability. Let's talk about things that are going on. Let's talk about challenges. Let's talk about where we're trying to go, and just trying to do all the things that just kind of make sense to do. And so it was that was some of the cultural shift that we had begun. And when it came time for us to need to pull together in the wake of the tornado, our team and our individuals were more ready.
Yeah, that makes sense. How many employees roughly?
Just under 40. So we're around 35, 35,
gotcha.
40.
And the prior president or CEO before you took over, was he also one of the owners, or was he an outside hire as well?
He was part of the ownership group.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're the first president in some time that's not been part of the ownership group.
I was the first, correct. So I was first president in a while that lived in Nashville. That was not part of the ownership group.
Is this a national company?
It's not a national company, but ownership was not. It is a. Did you say national
is
or
it
Nashville?
National? When you said okay, I was surprised to hear the president wasn't from Nashville. So there must be other manufacturing plants around.
So everything is in Tennessee, but all our manufacturing headquarters is here. Ownership is all in New York. And so that's the way it's worked. And so the former president was also one of the owners. I see. And so he ran it with some other leadership here in town.
I see. Fascinating.
And so it's been, you can imagine that in and of itself is part of a cultural shift.
Yeah,
for sure.
When
the president CEO actually comes to the office every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a big plus. Big plus. And then if it's anything like what we used to manufacture, then you just need to make sure you don't get too caught up in the manufacturing details. But that's a personality thing. I mean, that's a great model, I think, to have the leadership on site, particularly if you have one manufacturing location. Or is there other shops around?
We have
Tennessee?
Contract manufacturing that's in other parts of Tennessee.
But those are contract.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. What is your leadership team directly under you? How many, and what are their roles? And then how many of them did you hire?
So there are, we've made some adjustments over, we're always making adjustments, but we've done some adjustments in the last, 8-9 months. And so there are two guys who report to me, and the three of us are the management team. Yeah. So we've got one guy who's on the finance side and one guy who's on the operations side. Okay,
gotcha. Yeah, the one guy I noticed in your video. Say his name again. Aaron. Yeah. He popped up in your one video, which is great.
He's actually in a couple different videos. So okay. He doesn't love it, but he does great.
He did a great job.
He does very good.
Yeah, he did a great job. Yeah, your facility there looks really great. I'm sure you've been learning a ton, obviously. So I'm curious, what have you been learning about either manufacturing or business or leadership as you take on this new role, get into this, just getting to manufacturing is a thing all of its own. And then, of course, you had tornado thrown at you. You had moving locations thrown at you. You had COVID thrown at you, all these things. But I'm particularly kind of interested in your background in the digital marketing consulting space, now running a manufacturing company. I'm kind of curious how you look at business and leadership differently.
Yeah, so I am not a micromanager. And so if I would say one of my weaknesses is not to get in too deep into the weeds. It's usually to maybe stay too far from the weeds. And so that tends to work pretty well. That served me very well as a consultant for years because I didn't need to know all the details because I would probably stay a little bit higher level and think about strategically what do we need to do. In manufacturing, that serves you very well if you can trust all the people who work for you. And so, as you can imagine, if you're not sure who's doing what, how it's being done, and that sort of thing, you don't even know what you don't know. And so the first, probably year and a half, we're just really digging in, trying to understand all the facets of the business, but not be a micromanager at the same time, because there are always people. I mean, we've got a ton of employees that have been there for decades. And so I want to know enough to be able to make an informed decision. But I also know that I can go blow up somebody's day and then not even know that I had no clue what I was talking about.
Right.
And so I want to have that awareness, and I want to make sure I get enough information to help, to push, because sometimes I just need to be the one that pushes. And so I came into the role trying to figure out, how do I really make an impact here to see where this business is going? It's been around for decades. It's been around for over 40 years. Where are we going? What's going on? And how do we push it to grow? And so having very strong detail guys in the finance and operations team that I can trust implicitly, I think that's the magic of what makes it work for us. So sales, marketing, customer service, those folks report directly to me. Eric, our finance guy, he's got a great handle on his team, great team. And Aaron, as our operations guy, has a great team and has a wonderful understanding of what they need to do. And so the three of us talk a lot. I think we've got a really good thing going. And then we often make decisions collectively, or at least inform each other, and we'll bounce things off each other. And we've got a good culture where we can disagree with each other. But it doesn't get weird. You're just like, all right, well, that's dumb.
Yeah.
And so or you may say, hey, I want to do this. Is this dumb?
Yep.
And then they need to feel free to say that.
Yeah. Have you gotten sort of disinterested blank stares from the more hourly or folks on the floor when you're bringing them into some of these monthly meetings and talking about goals and direction of the company and those types of things? As you become more transparent, it sounds like your leadership style is maybe more transparent than maybe what they've had in the past. And that kind of cuts both ways. Sometimes people just want to know what they should do, and they just come in and punch a clock and put their head down, do their work, and go home, and they don't want to be brought in on all this other stuff.
Sure.
And then some people do enjoy being brought in on that stuff, and I know that's one thing that I've seen it both ways in our company in the past, where we've seen it both ways, where there's good and bad. So how are you finding your balance there with transparency?
So, I mean, the interesting thing with being transparent is that you hope and assume everybody can handle it, right? Classic, few good men, can you handle, or you can't handle the truth. So I tend to err on the side of putting the truth out there, and then if somebody can't handle it, then we'll explain it to them.
Yep.
Perhaps one-on-one, or kind of push that truth in a little further if we need to. And so I would say the team, the company, and the employees as a whole have responded to it really well. I mean, again, we started doing that well before the tornado. It has served us well because I think they needed to see and hear that there wasn't this massive divide between management and the rest of the company and all the different sort of middle management and the layers, within. We need to pull together and say, we're all in this together, but we all have different roles, and we all have to serve in different ways. And at the end of the day, we got some guys in New York that are looking at me and trying to say, are you leading us where we need to go?
Yeah.
They want to see a return on their investment. I want them to see a return on their investment. That'll be good for everybody. And so it's been good to see our folks. Frankly, they just really responded
good.
Well, I mean, there are a few times where we get off into some details and somebody maybe doesn't quite understand what we're saying. And, one of our supervisors might pull them aside and help them understand it. But I don't regret the strategy or approach at all.
Is the common comp on the floor, is it hourly or is it more piece rate?
We've got a mix of hourly and salary. So once somebody moves into a more leadership position, they'll typically be a salaried employee, and then otherwise it's an hourly.
Yep. Okay. And the ownership group, is it several or is it like 20? Like, is this?
It is one organization now.
Okay.
Out of New York. Yeah.
And what is your reporting structure like to them? Do you have monthly business reviews?
So it is. I think I've got a pretty sweet deal. because they are very content to trust us to do what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I have not felt, these guys they're outstanding. And so they're amazing partners. They offer support. They're there when we need them. They're also happy to not get pulled into stuff that they don't want to be.
Yep.
So I think, there are situations where owners can get way too deep into things. And then, of course, if they ask for things, then it can undermine what maybe management is trying to do, and it can be a huge mess.
Yeah.
And so, so our ownership team is not doing that.
Do you have a really clear, though, reporting structure? Like, is there things they get weekly and monthly and quarterly, or not so much?
So they would get daily reports, actually, pre-tornado. And so we're in the process of bringing the daily and the monthlies back.
I see. Yeah, very cool. Is there anything that, and the answer might be no, which is fine, where you thought of business kind of one way when you were in the digital marketing consulting space, but now that you're president of this manufacturing company, you see, what I thought before, it's actually not so much like that. Here's how it kind of is, Is there anything where you've had a change of view on anything?
I would say I want to be careful here. I've realized how much I didn't know about business.
Sure.
When I was consulting businesses. So to whoever I consulted poorly for 11 years, I should probably apologize. But I feel like 2.5 years leading an actual organization that has actual employees with all the actual things that you have to do that come along with that. And, being a consultant, there were hardly any hard costs. Labor wasn't something I was thinking about on a regular basis. Delivery times and managing international customers and all of their expectations. It's just in the finance side, with ownership and banks and insurance and lawyers and like all the things. I feel like I've gotten an MBA in 2.5 years.
Yeah, I believe that
at the company, and it just shows me how much I didn't know when I was talking specifically about business and consulting. And so it does make me wonder. I think I'm probably more skeptical now of a lot of people who are consultants if they haven't been in business.
Sure. Yeah.
Only because I would be skeptical of myself.
Sure.
2020 Bill would be skeptical of, say, 2017 Bill.
Yeah. And I think it depends on what you're trying to get out of 2017 Bill, too, because if you are a manufacturing company, or a president of a manufacturing company, or any company for that matter, but you're looking for some consulting or some input from an expert on a particular subject matter, back to 2015 Bill or 2017 Bill, well, then you're just looking for that guy who knows a lot about that one particular subject. But if you're bringing in a business consultant or a business advisor, that type of a thing, in a more holistic approach, then I think it really that experience really does matter, because it is different. Yeah, when you're in when you're in it, it really is.
Yep.
Labor costs very important. Overhead's very important. I would know.
Yep. Yes. Yeah. All those things.
There's some things that went sideways for us for sure. Counting systems are also very important. Have them neat and tidy and keep them clean. Do not let
listen,
get out of hand.
We've had a few folks come through accounting.
Yeah. Well, if you do try to change your accounting system, make sure you really stay on top of that. What do you use?
So we use an ERP system that's specifically for manufacturing.
Oh, okay. You're ready. You're ready into ERP then?
Yeah.
Did you implement that, or was that?
No, it's been around for a long time.
Oh, great.
But so again, the company wasn't fully utilizing it.
I see.
And so the company had it for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
But wasn't fully utilizing it. And so we started to lean into it more in late 2019. And it hadn't been upgraded in about a decade. And so we did a massive, so beyond rebuilding the business, we've completely revamped all of our data structure on the back end of the company and have upgraded our ERP system.
Yep.
So again, we're leaning into all the things.
Yeah, that's great. As long as it doesn't get away from you. Our ERP implementation got away from us. It's completely
okay.
It's awful. So we shut it down about a half a year before we shut everything down.
So ours was not. This isn't a new integration. It's just moving, advancing the one that we've already had, and starting to use more modules within it.
Changing subjects. You were one of the first on the social media front. I mean, you were one of the experts, if you will, on that whole thing years and years ago. I mean, when was that? 2007?
So 2007
was iPhone, right?
So YouTube came on the scene in 2005.
15 years ago.
Yeah, so 2005, and that's and late 2005 is when I started to pay attention to it.
So you were in there early, and I remember that from our prior conversation. So my question is, what are your thoughts on social media now? I'm curious if you saw the Netflix documentary,
The Social Dilemma.
The Social Dilemma. Did you see that yet?
I haven't seen it yet.
You need to see that.
Yeah, it's on my queue.
So 63.
Wait, what's Netflix?
What? Oh, yeah. Assuming you haven't already canceled Netflix.
No, I still have
for
Netflix.
any particular reason. The Social Dilemma is a very good documentary on Netflix.
It's really in my queue.
Really good.
It's in my queue.
And there's a stat from that documentary. 63% of, let's see if I can get this right. 63%.
I have it here.
It's 64% of people who join extremist groups on Facebook. Okay.
All right.
Did so because the algorithm steered them there. 64% because the algorithm steered them there. And
I'm going to have more coffee for this part of the conversation, I think.
Andrew, you want to grab some more right there?
Sure thing.
Another stat from their documentary, the number of countries using political disinformation campaigns on social media has doubled in the past 2 years. That's not that surprising to me. But this is interesting. So every social media user does have a profile. So you have a profile on Facebook. I have a profile on Facebook.
Sure.
You have a profile on Twitter. I have one. Instagram, so forth.
Not anymore.
You
My
deleted-
Twitter profile got hacked. Like a year. I want to say it got hacked a year and a half ago, and I had a friend named Eric said, "Hey, you might want to check." He hit me up on Facebook Messenger. Hey, you might want to check your Twitter profile got hacked. And it's like showing girls in bikinis or something like that.
Oh, yeah?
And I was like, all right, well, that's not me. And I looked it up, and I was just like, they can have it.
You just delete it?
Or
you just let it go?
I let it go. So
why didn't you delete it?
I deleted my name.
Okay.
And then but I didn't try to recover it or anything like that.
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, what I mean by profile is not so much that you have, I don't really mean that you have an account. I'm just saying
I get you.
The algorithm has a bead on you, and there's this was from 2016. Back in 2016, this is 4 years ago, there was 29,000 different considerations that went into your particular algorithmic profile.
Nice word. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's crazy. So what do you make of social media now that here we are in 2020?
So that's not very, so I think what's interesting is that's not social. That's social on the back end, meaning it's taking algorithms and then it's pulling the social threads and the social connections and leveraging the social connections once it's made all these algorithmic determinations. Originally, social media was just about people connecting with people.
Exactly.
And so that's what's flipped dramatically is that the personal data and all of the things that can be extracted from that, and then tracking activity, and then making correlations through that that's what was not part of the original setup. Thank you so much.
Well, exactly. But that is kind of the whole point of the social dilemma. It's their point of that documentary is not that, we're becoming too social, we're spending too much time talking to each other. The whole point of that is we're now starting to have our decisions and our actions dictated by the algorithm.
Yep.
Which is a relatively concerning situation to be in as a society.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants that.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, we've always had other voices telling us things, and so whether it's been literature over the years or media empires. I mean, think about somebody like William Randolph Hearst, as a media newspaper guy, back in the day. it wasn't like a lily white, perfect, pristine time.
Right. Well, I don't disagree with you on that, but we've never had
It is
this
more aggressive
amount
now.
of specific targeted information, that we have to deal with individually. And, let's face it, a lot of people are spending a ton of time on Facebook and YouTube, and then you have your notifications that pop up, and all of those. And then Google's a huge one. Google knows what you're into, and now they're bringing stuff when you Google certain things. Like so I agree that we have had, it's not like we've had a rosy past at all times, but we've never dealt with such a powerful, specific, deliberate kind of manipulation of us as a person individually that we have to battle against. And look, battling against this is relatively easy if you want to just get rid of your smartphone and go to a dumb phone, or get rid of all your social media and never go on YouTube or never use Google. Then I think you've kind of got it at that point. But, no one's really, not too many people are prepared to do that.
Yeah. Listen, the webs, not the websites, the apps are built to hook you in.
Yeah.
They are programmed to make you want to stay longer.
Mm-hmm.
Netflix wants you to watch more movies and shows.
Yep.
So they win when you're on there more. And I think if you know that, I remember years ago when I would do consulting and training events and conferences, I remember telling people, I said, LinkedIn is most interested in your data. They kind of don't care if you find a job through some LinkedIn contact.
Right.
Now, they want to sell you some recruiting services, perhaps, or they want to sell you some things through that. But LinkedIn is about data.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why when you pay a premium fee, a monthly premium fee, you get more data. You personally get more access to more things. You get better search. And so, LinkedIn was probably one of the first that was very kind of candid about it. And it seemed a little ugly at the time.
Yeah.
And yet I think they were pretty clear right off the bat about what was driving them.
Do you think that do you think there's a good argument for social media being a utility and not privately owned? And by that, I mean, so Micah over here with, I think it's New Unity, he does branding, and he was doing some work with a local power company, and it was privately owned, but it turned into, let me see if I can get it right. It's the way the state looked at that, it needed to be a utility. That's my point. So it was privately owned, but heavily regulated by the government, and it was treated as utility, and you couldn't have other competitors. They wouldn't allow another competitor to come in, but you had to play by the government's role. So it was still privately owned, but it really was run like a government-owned thing, because the premise for that is everyone needs it. So we can't have a monopoly with, say, water, because everyone needs water, and you can't have someone owning the water space and then doing whatever they want to do with your life through your water bill.
Right.
And there are some now that are arguing that Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, I haven't heard that so much with YouTube, that it's so important now. It's how so many people get their news. It's so integral, I guess, into our lives that it should be a utility and not run by,
Yeah, I haven't heard that argument. I would really need to think about that. I, in general, don't like the idea of businesses being taken over.
I agree with that.
By the government.
Yep.
So that just right off the bat sounds like I don't like that. Directionally, I don't like what that sounds like it's doing. I can see, though, I don't know if you have to make a really strong utilitarian argument there, and that gets into how people are accessing data and information. I don't know. I think the fact of the matter is, if the government, for instance, wanted to create something that would function in this way, they could mirror many of the capabilities.
Yeah.
So why not do that as a public connection point, type of a situation? Yeah,
they could, and it would probably suck. You know what I mean? If the government tried to have a governmental run or launched Facebook, that probably would suck. Probably no one would use it.
Well, so they aren't then held to the same standards as the free market is what we would say.
Exactly.
But we know that, that's just how it is.
Yeah.
But I think, I don't know. In general, my gut take is it's pretty hesitant to think that, one, that it should be a utility, and two, that it even is a utility.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to think about that more before I could probably buy that rationale.
Just watching The Social Dilemma, I mean, it's fairly concerning with like how integrated these algorithms are becoming a part of our everyday human experience, particularly as like 13, 14, I don't know. I guess there's probably kids even, which I can't imagine, on social media, 8, 9, 12, which just seems crazy. But that's just normal life for them. So it's like, it's super integrated. The thing though that caught my attention the most, which I think is explaining some of like some of the crazy stuff going on out there, is the fact that so many of these people joining these extremist groups were like kind of directed there from the algorithms. That seems concerning.
Yeah, I mean, if that's happening, that's not good.
Trust me, it's happening, bro. Maybe you're not on social media so much, or because you're on to important things, which is very, very good. But there is a lot of weird stuff floating around out there.
Yeah, so I am on some, but I spent so many years in deep all the time, every day in early, and so I think I'm certainly not on like I used to. I clearly didn't care about my Twitter account.
Yeah.
I don't do anything on Instagram. I'm on Facebook some.
Yeah. Well, it's not the people that have a purpose and a mission and a goal like you do. I think it's the people that have too much spare time and they just get sucked down all these rabbit holes, and then they're spreading the information, and next thing you know, there's weird stuff happening.
Well, so I think this is where did the companies rise up and take their platforms back?
Right.
So, my thought would be, well, what is Facebook, for instance, doing to rise up and take its platform back? What is Twitter doing? What is YouTube doing? What is Instagram, Snapchat, whoever else?
Yeah.
TikTok, of course.
Yeah.
If they feel the need to rise up and take their platform back, then do it.
Yeah.
Now, I understand. I do read enough to know that there's blowback even on that. And what does it look like, politically speaking, to rise up and take your platform back?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that it's easy, but I think that's where, if you want to avoid losing something that you built, go get it back and do your best to fix it.
Yeah, yeah. Have you been following the election closely or not closely?
I don't need election.
Yeah, there's one. Is it next week? Well, I guess it's happening now in a lot of places, right?
It is happening all over, of course.
Voted.
And it's just over a week from now. I was a political science major in college. I worked for a congressman for a summer before my senior year of college. I'm kind of into politics. And unfortunately, I'm into politics. And so I will say this, after spending 3 months in DC, this was back in the 90s, when it was the summer, I was an intern the summer that Monica Lewinsky scandal was going around. And so being an intern, when that was the intern story of the century, that was a little awkward.
Wow.
But so
where were you interning?
I for a Republican congressman in Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you were in DC.
But I was at the DC office.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So where do you see the country going if Trump gets it, and where do you see us heading if Biden gets it?
Well, so, I mean, there are so many things, there are so many thoughts on this. I did not vote for Trump in the last election. I did not vote for Clinton. I went third party.
Mm-hmm.
So I voted third party because I couldn't bring myself to vote for either of the major party candidates last time around, for a variety of reasons. But ultimately, it came down to, I don't trust that either one of these people is going to, frankly, be awesome for our country and for, I guess, what would be my vision of the country. And so that was the first, since I've been old enough to vote for presidents, that's the first time that I had not voted for the Republican candidate. And so I'd always voted for a Republican prior to that, until that election. And I am likely going to do the same thing next week. I cannot bring myself, and here's the deal. We live in Tennessee. We know what color Tennessee is going to be on election night. So I was talking to a friend over the weekend, and we said we both feel like we can have these philosophical debates about what you want to do with the presidential election, but we live in a very staunchly red state.
Sure.
So our vote is not going to push it,
Yep.
one way or the other. I think we would have more to wrestle with.
Yep. If
Just
it were
in general,
like
if it
Ohio
were
or
Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan,
Yep.
Even North Carolina seems to be potentially up for grabs.
Yep.
So so there's a lot to consider there, and so I think the next 4 years with Trump in the White House, I don't trust his decision making. If I just think about this, if he were a business leader, he would prove himself to me to not be somebody who I could trust, because he's going to say one thing and do another. He doesn't surround himself with people who he seems to listen to and take their counsel. And even if he says it one day, it doesn't mean he's going to do it the next. I find that terribly troubling,
right.
particularly from the President of the United States.
Yep.
I think he regularly stoops below his position. Twitter has not helped him, but I think he has such an ego that he has to have the attention all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Twitter lets him do that. And so I think that's where he is. I've got a slew of concerns about him. Now he has done some things that I've been frankly pleasantly surprised with, even in regard to some peace deals, like some of what he's been able to do with some recent peace deals in the Middle East. Even in just recent weeks, I thought, okay, well that's some really positive stuff. Frankly, I kind of was surprised that he was able to pull some of that off. So I want to give credit where credit is due, but on the whole, I struggle significantly with him. Obviously, I did 4 years ago. I, like many people, I didn't take him seriously as a legitimate candidate.
Yep.
I frankly still don't take him seriously as a legitimate candidate, and I think time will tell that he has probably ruined the Republican Party from what it used to be, and it's been recrafted into something entirely different.
Okay, interesting. So let's assume that he loses this election, and so then you're coming back in 2024, and the Republican Party is trying to take over or trying to put their guy or gal in as president at that point. When you say ruin the Republican Party, what are you thinking the Republican Party needs to work through, or what does it look like at the next election cycle?
Yeah, so my hope is that the Republican Party stands for the free market.
Mm-hmm.
My hope is that it stands for life and justice. And so, even going back to Nixon would talk about law and order. Trump's been talking about law and order a lot. So given the summer that we had in the United States, there was a lot of talk about law and order. Mm-hmm. And those are often those, they're called the dog whistles, to try to get people who have a lot of racist thoughts or history or tendency, or who just flat out are racist to kind of fire up that base.
Yep.
Law and order should just mean justice for all.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it doesn't. That's a problem to me. So why is law and order and why are law and order and justice not the same thing?
Yeah. Okay.
That doesn't seem. I don't like that history of the Republicans, and so the Republicans have some troubling history themselves. I mean, even going back to the Reagan days.
Yep.
So when it comes to race relations and just the way race is viewed in the United States, in crime, I mean, there's a lot of work to do. So my hope. Perhaps my hope for the Republican Party is that Trump has pushed it so far that it has caused those who would still consider themselves conservative but not Trump-based conservatives to maybe say, what do we really need to be doing? What do we need to do to sort of reconcile back to something that is a more thoughtful? I mean, wasn't it George W. Bush talked about the compassionate conservative? Well, that always sort of rang a little false at the time, but man, that would be really nice to have moving forward. And frankly, it would be such a stark contrast to what we have today, that compassionate should mean just law, just order. It should mean that there's life and liberty while pursuing happiness for everybody. And frankly, that doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are, because we're trying to all live in this country together.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of the United States was to be a place where we can all function and live together. And both parties have largely walked away from that. Both parties are well served to incite disunity.
Yes.
And so I'm waiting for somebody to come back and say, let's bring this thing together. So some of what Biden is trying to do right now is hitting on those notes. But he's doing so as a Democrat in a party that has just as much as Republicans has often sought to divide people as well. So the two major parties have loads of baggage, and it's going to take somebody to either rise up and really try to revamp and overhaul those parties, or I think never has there been a better chance for a third party organization or a third party just to rise up.
Yeah. So the Biden thing is a good example, because I agree. My perception is, now I will say that I share basically all of your thoughts with Trump. I will say in his defense, which you probably agree with too, that he hasn't always been given a fair shake from the media, and they have positioned him in a certain way as well. I'm not saying it's all incorrect, but I share your thoughts on Trump.
I would dare say every president would say they don't get a fair shake from the media.
Yeah, it's probably true. Well, yeah.
I've heard the argument that he's been scrutinized more than past presidents. I mean, I'd say, okay, I don't know how to quantify that.
Yeah, I think it depends which news outlet.
Maybe not. I don't truly know.
Well, I think it depends which news outlet. So that's actually a great point, because if someone's just watching Fox, then Trump's the savior. But if they're watching CNN, MSNBC, NBC, those other things, and then they do position him in a somewhat negative light, as it seems to be whenever they have a chance. My perception, though, back to the race thing, quite frankly, my perception is that Biden would be better than Trump in terms of better race relations. Now, I could be wrong. That's my perception. And that does seem to be a more a better strength of the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. But why does it then have to come at the expense of free market? You know what I mean? Why can't we have both of these things? Why do they need to be at odds with each other? So back to your comment on hope that Gore desire would be to see some of these better race relations brought into a more compassionate conservative group. I sort of feel like there's an undercurrent in that direction on the Republican side. Do you feel the same?
Absolutely.
And so maybe
in my circles, I hear it all the time.
Okay, yeah. So maybe in 4 years, is it too idealistic to think that we can get the best of both worlds a little bit, if you will, where we have a good, strong leader who understands the value of free market, but also the value of justice for all? I mean, is that too much to ask for? Or do you think we're heading in that direction? The Republican Party's heading in that direction already?
I think if Trump wins the election, that perhaps momentum that you're sensing will grow dramatically. That's this undercurrent of conservatives, because it will continue. Something will have to grow in contrast to him. If he loses, then everything is up for grabs in the Republican Party at that point. And I think it would be an opportunity for just a more centrist person to come in, but could still have some. They're going to probably try to borrow some things that Trump, was able to play well to win over the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And so I think that change that more dramatic change that you're sort of referencing there is probably most likely to happen if Trump actually wins the election.
So, but don't you think if Trump wins the election, the Republican Party says, well, look, see, he was a divisive guy, but he got it done for us, so let's get more of that?
Yes. And because that will happen, I think that's why there will be this stronger conservative backlash under the current.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, do you think there's any path? I mean, there's always a path, but based on what I'm reading and hearing, it looks likely that Biden's in. Right, I mean, he's further ahead, way further ahead than
it does, except
Hillary
for the fact that everybody thought Hillary was in,
Yeah,
And-
I mean
and it was quite a shock, that
You're
night
right.
to most of the country, frankly.
Most certainly. But
So-
Biden's lead is way more than Trump. But I guess it depends where you get.
I haven't
your
done
news
I
source
haven't
from.
done a comparison on what we're today recording this. We're 8 days away from the election. I think I don't know what the polls were saying 4 years ago. 8 days out,
Yeah, I think.
everything had Hillary
Yeah,
in the
it did.
lead, as I recall, because it seemed like most folks were expecting that it was kind of a done deal.
Yeah.
And it clearly wasn't,
Yep.
and that was a crazy, crazy night.
Yep.
And so a lot of Democrat parties got ruined,
Yeah.
that night. Not the party itself, although some would argue that it did too. But
Yeah.
like the actual, events. And so I don't know. I mean, that's where I don't know what to believe. I say that probably every other day when I'm talking to somebody. It's like I don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if we're talking about COVID. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the election. It doesn't matter. Like because we've got algorithms,
Yes.
sending things our way. We've got clearly there are, the State Department came out last week saying that Russia and Iran and other countries are trying to interfere in the election.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just a lot of like, what? I don't know what to believe.
I agree.
So I want to underreact and try to thoughtfully take in what I'm hearing. Go, all right, does that seem consistent? So I'm usually looking for consistency of data points and say, okay, that seems to line up with that, and that lines up with that. Therefore, it's probably true or more likely to be true. Versus, well, that seems like the crazy uncle that just ran
Right.
off over that way, and there seems to be no correlation
Yes.
to that.
This is, don't entirely quote me on this, but I think 2016, about this time, Hillary had a 4-point lead, and right now Biden's like 9. That's rough.
Okay.
So, but again, I'm with you. I don't know exactly what to believe, and it wouldn't shock me at all if Trump gets in, because it seems like there's an advantage there to Biden to sort of position him as like the shoo-in. He's going to win. I don't know how that affects voters or whatnot, but and if more of the media does tend to go left, and that's what we're hearing, it looks likely that Biden's going to get in. I don't know, but anything could happen, I suppose. But
At the end of the
interesting
day,
times to be alive,
well,
man.
at the end of the day, I think all of us have not only a choice for president, but we have the choice of choosing whether we're going to be afraid or not.
I agree.
Both parties win if you are afraid of the other side. Nothing motivates people like fear.
Mhm.
And so the Republicans get more people to vote for Trump if they can make people afraid
Yeah.
of Biden.
Yep.
Biden wins if he makes more people afraid of Trump.
Yes.
I mean, that's politics 101,
Yes.
right? That's part of what happens. And so you just know it, but it does seem heightened, this year. I think maybe it's because of the personalities involved. Maybe it's because of the means at which we can get more access to more media. There's just a lot more stuff kind of coming at us. And so we have to stop. We can push the pause button on almost all of this communication and information coming at us. And then we can decide if we're going to be afraid by this or not.
Yeah, agreed. One thing I've been curious about when it comes to fake news and infiltration from other countries and other countries pushing their agenda here stateside is, and I guess I'm looking to understand the movement a little better in general, is Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because you and I both agree with that. Black Lives Matter. Andrew agrees with that. I think we all in this room agree with that.
And you're saying lowercase b, lowercase
b,
l,
absolutely,
lowercase m.
yeah.
Gotcha. All right.
Well, what gets even weirder than that, because I was hearing Mark Cuban explain to Megyn Kelly, that he's of course, for lowercase, letters. Everyone is, I
Right,
think,
right.
or they'd say they are. But he's even for capital letters, but he's not for blacklivesmatter.com. And now I was like, I don't even
Oh, that's
know.
interesting.
I thought that was all the same. Now, just because I'll let him say it on the air himself, but I did have someone who I would trust his opinion. It's not just a friend who reads a lot, but who does have concerns that Russia is behind Black Lives Matter. Do you know
I've never
much
heard
about that organization? Do you?
So I've never been on the Black Lives Matter website. I've heard some of the arguments against Black Lives Matter from conservative outlets. I've heard much of the support for Black Lives Matter as an organization. And I think, listen, we have to always weigh what we're affiliating ourselves with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one thing to affiliate yourself with Black Lives Matter as an organization and determine if you agree with the stance and the tenets of an organization. You do that with the Rotary Club. You do that with everything. So what's interesting about Black Lives Matter is that the name of the organization and the entity jumped the culture and became a much broader tagline and a much broader war cry, and a necessary one. Honestly, it's just a necessary one. And so it's tough, I think, for some folks, particularly white folks, to or maybe they're not always willing to separate out the BLM organization versus Black Lives Matter as a statement of truth,
Right.
and as a statement of recognition of years of oppression.
Right.
As a need of saying there is something that needs to be fixed. The only reason that lowercase b, lowercase l, lowercase m, Black Lives Matter needs to be said is because our history hasn't proven that to be the case. Our history hasn't proven that to be true. So despite the fact that the Constitution says that all Americans should be able to pursue happiness and have life and liberty,
Mm-hmm.
well, Black lives haven't gotten to live fully for good chunks of this American history. Black lives haven't gotten liberty for good chunks of this American history. And so that is worth talking about. That is worth talking to my children about. That is worth us as a society talking about. That's worth us as white people talking about and wrestling through that. And so that is, to me, that is one of the best things that has come from all of the conversations, all of the push. And so I'm willing to sort of separate wheat and chaff. It's a good, sort of separating wheat and chaff, straight from the Bible. And that's, I'm willing to separate wheat and chaff and go, it is good for us to talk about these things. I probably, if I were to look at the Black Lives Matter website and all the things that they stand for, based on some of the things I've heard, if those are true, I'm sure, struggle with some of those things.
Yep.
Or flat out just not support. But I can get behind Black lives mattering in our world, by the way. Let's not just limit it to the United States. That has not always been the case historically.
I think that's extremely well said. I mean, I've read books this year that I wouldn't have otherwise. I know a lot of people that read a lot of books this year that they wouldn't have otherwise. So there's a very good kind of wear-off effects of even, say, Black Lives Matter as a mission or a community or an organization. Just to mention real quick, the person who told me that about potentially rushing behind BLM was not white, by the way. So that's probably sounds like that came from a white guy, but it did not. And then also, and this is where it got a little, where I'd love to have someone on here who's sort of an expert here to dig into it, because I have read through most of the BLM website.
Okay.
And honestly, there's a lot there that I agreed with, and there's some I just don't know.
Sure.
And then there's a small percentage that I would disagree with,
Yeah.
But then you hear, apparently it's hard to trust the news, and then you try to figure out where you can connect with other people who actually know what they're talking about. And this one guy just mentioned that, so I just didn't know. I know there's a lot of people that are really very opposed to it as an organization. They would agree with it lowercase, but strongly opposed to it as an organization. And I just haven't quite, I guess, gotten the facts or data that I'm looking for to maybe understand where they're coming from. But
yeah, and I would say I haven't dug in either. I know we have enough work to do to make all the lowercase versions of it, meaningful and for true change to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I've just looked at, like, I know there's a big flurry of emotional activity over the capital BLM. And it's sort of like, I know that's there, and I've just chosen to not weigh into that.
Sure.
Perhaps it's a little bit of willful ignorance, but I think that seems to be something that has been hugely politicized.
Yeah, I agree.
And there's all this really good stuff that has kind of spun off of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the wheat that I think has spun off of this, and we've got a lot to work with there.
Yep.
And so I think I've just sort of said, let me lean into that and what I can learn there, and how that's going to impact, because that's very meaningful stuff.
Yeah, totally agree. This is changing subjects, but I've been curious. I know you're interested and well read theologically and so forth. You pay attention to the church and have been an elder at your church and all of this. So I'm curious if you're seeing particular trends in the church today, or maybe speakers or preachers or authors that are popular now or in the last year or two, nothing to do now with race or anything like that, but that you're concerned about, or you think are exceptionally, good. Any newcomers on kind of that front, or any trends you're seeing in the church that either for the good or the bad?
So I'm just trying to think. I think when I'm reading theology, I'm reading more dead people, old dead people, than modern live people.
Yeah.
And so, because again, I mean, thinking about the year that we're in, and with COVID and politics, how many religious leaders have weighed in and have chosen to politicize whatever's going on in their situation. And so I have found some of that helpful and interesting. I've found some of it unhelpful. And so when I'm reading what I have found in 2020, if I'm reading something that's even 2019 theologically based, it is probably an old dead guy, truthfully, more often than not. And so that's generally where I'm going, because it kind of, I mean, it goes back to my prior point where I want to just weigh the information. I want to try to take it in and astutely look at it. And then if it's something current, I just want to be mindful of what is informing this current perspective.
Yeah.
I don't want to be overly swayed by the things that seem just hot topics today. I don't need another hot take on things.
Right. I think that is a wise way to look at it, is if there is a new trend or fad that, all right, let's see what it's about. Let's see what it's saying, but let's not assume. Maybe we should take a little bit of a hesitant look at it, at least initially, because, I mean, the Bible's 2,000 plus years old, right? And so, and it's the inspired word of God. So if something new is coming along, let's really make sure. I mean, we had 2,000 years to arrive at a particular viewpoint that apparently now we're just arriving at. So that should be, not to say we don't keep learning new things, of course, but take a somewhat cautious view on latest trends and fads. Yeah,
I think Americans want the latest. We want the best. We are conditioned to be consumers, and that has bled into our churches and our theology.
Yeah.
And so I want to not give into that easily. I'm not that I'm saying like I can dodge it, but I want to try my best to fight that.
Yeah. Our pastors, where we go to church at Emmanuel Nashville, Andrew goes, there's two, by the way, that's where I met him. I would say they take pains to not express their political viewpoint. And But then what was interesting was we had a pastor theologian on here from Christ Pres, a guy named David Filson, and he has in his Instagram bio that he's a Republican. And his thought process was, people deserve to know how he believes, and some of his best friends disagree with him, but at least they know where he stands, and they can reason through and have a good conversation. So I just sort of saw that as like two different kind of viewpoints on there, and I think either one sort of works. I think what we would both agree with, both Filson and, say, TJ, who doesn't come out with his political viewpoints, at least not publicly, would both agree on that the pastor who is bringing his political viewpoints across the pulpit and getting loud and proud with all that gets out of it. It gets contentious and divisive, and now the Gospels does get a little bit clouded. So is that how you would see it as well?
Well, every pastor needs to measure his words. I think the pulpit is a unique spot to be. But you're on the hook for everything that you say. And I think that's where some patient and some measured perspective comes into play here. Very few things are as simple in reality as a tweet or as an aside comment or illustration in a sermon. And so I tend to want to push to very candid, very radical, hard, difficult, awkward conversations in person. And so when the pastor is preaching, he's in a spot to speak truth, to share the truth of the Bible, and where he can make applicable connections to today, he should. But then he needs to know his congregation as well. Mm-hmm. He needs to know how things are going to land. I mean, he's not a speaker who flies in. He's not a speaker. Yeah. He's a preacher. Yep. He's a pastor. He's a shepherd. And so he has to know how to take that passage for the week and present it in such a way that it will land with his congregation. And so there's a lot more to think about there than, is he a political preacher or is he not a political preacher?
Sure.
And so, and some of it comes down to comfort level. I know there are people who are convictional on both sides of this topic who would say, a preacher should absolutely, get into certain political topics. I know others who would say, no, stay out of those weeds, they would say, So I'm not a preacher, but I think it is something there will be times that I think a preacher needs to weigh into political issues. Mm-hmm. And I think there are times where he needs to not.
Yeah.
And my hope and prayer for him would be that he's wise enough to know the difference between the two.
Well, I was going to say, we're trusting him to rightly divide the word of God, so we should have some level of trust there,
right,
at that level.
And if you're in an elder-led church, there's a plurality of elders there who can help navigate that.
Mm-hmm. You brought a couple of books. Can we take a look at those? And why did you bring them?
I did. These are not theology books, by the way. So
another change of subject. That's okay.
All right. So in preparation for this, you asked if there are any books that I've read, and so in earlier this year, I typically read a lot after the tornado, and then as COVID, because all the COVID stuff started happening about 2 weeks after the tornado, I was emotionally not interested in reading a thing. I couldn't listen to a podcast. I couldn't read. I couldn't do anything for several months. And it wasn't until about the middle of the summer that I started reading again. I started listening to podcasts again. I could not take more inputs.
You just couldn't take more content.
I just did not need more information coming at me. Mm-hmm. And so one of the books that I'll start with this one first. One of the books that I have picked up is Upstream by Dan Heath. So the Heath brothers have written a number of really good books. Upstream is basically a book about how to deal with problems further up the line before they get worse. And so the opening illustration imagines that the two of us are out. Let's say we're out throwing a football, by a river here in Tennessee, and we see a small child floating down the river and splashing around and screaming. And so we run out, we rescue this child, we bring the child in for shore. And just as we're getting back on shore, we see another child. And so we run out, we get this child. And then just as we get this child in, we see another child. So we run out, we get this third child in on the shore. And just as we're getting this third child, we see a fourth. And yet you're not with me to go out and get this child. You're actually getting out of the water and you're going upstream. And so I ask you, Kent, where are you going? And you're saying, I'm going to go get the guy that's throwing the kids in the stream.
Seems logical.
And so that's essentially what this whole book is about, is what's going on upstream that's causing the issues that you see today.
Yeah, interesting.
And so the whole book's premise is to think, how do you think about that and how you look at processes and how you analyze and just what is your mindset?
Mm-hmm.
And do you look at today's problems as isolated to today, or is this indicative of something happening upstream? Because if you could fix that,
yes,
it will work its way downstream.
Yeah, so it's about like getting to the root of the problems.
It is.
And not putting Band-Aids on bullet holes. Like getting,
there you go.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Now, did you read this already?
I did.
But there's no markings in here. What's going on?
So
with
I
that?
flipped the pages down. You'll see that
I see that.
I have found out recently that is sacrilege for certain people. Like they will not turn the pages down.
Right.
And so,
did you do that? Do you do that on all your books? You just do that in case you want to pop some pages?
I do that
open on
in
the
case
podcast?
I want. No, I do this when I read.
Oh wow!
Because what I will often do is I'll find a page, and so right here, this is how I'll do it. I'll find a page and then I'll bracket or underline a section.
Yeah.
And so when I see the tab, I know that there was something there I want to see.
Oh, interesting.
And then I'll come back and find it.
I see. Yeah, it just stood out to me that there's not a lot of markings and there's really not a lot of underlines in here.
I don't underline. I don't underline. I'll bracket. I'll maybe make a quick note from time to time.
Have you always done that?
In recent years, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This I see was copyright 2020, so this is a brand new book.
This is a new book.
And
correct.
It was helpful, I assume? That's why you bought it?
really good. And also, I mean, think about where we've been, and we're rebuilding an old company. And so it's interesting to think back to what we were and what we're trying to be. And what was, I think, very encouraging was much of this thinking was already in motion as we've been rebuilding the company.
The other thing that's interesting about that concept is I do feel like that explains a lot with where we're at right now politically in our country.
Oh, listen,
right?
you can extrapolate this this thought into honestly about any realm.
Yeah.
You can think about it in terms of relationships and families and church life, work life, political life. I mean, you can't help but say, let's not be short-sighted and imagine that where we find ourselves today just happened today.
Exactly.
We just happened here.
Yep. Love it. Thanks for bringing it.
All right, number 2. This is a book I actually read about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, Compelling People. So Compelling People was and this actually brought this for you. So this is your copy of Compelling People.
Appreciate
I've purchased loads of those.
Really?
Because I've had a bunch of people at our company read through it. The bottom line, and so my friend Kay Gouda is the gentleman who recommended this book to me, and I referenced the heck out of this book right here. I would say it is the most referenced book I have read in a decade.
Oh, wow.
Because what it talks about is the two compelling features of any person are strength and warmth. And so there's a graph in here that talks about strength and warmth. And if you think about it, strength is a very compelling trait. And so the opposite of strength would be weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Warmth is also a very compelling trait, but the opposite of warmth is coldness.
Mm-hmm.
So warm people tend to be viewed as weak. So they may have one strength, but they have the other weakness. Strong people tend to be viewed as cold. So they have one strength, but they have the other weakness. So what this book is trying to help you understand is that the best case scenario that you could find, particularly as a leader, is how do you get more strength and warmth. How do you maximize both of those things? So it talks about that, and you can find the diagram in there, and you can actually almost say, like, where am I as a leader in my organization? Am I more strong? Am I more warm? Am I viewed as a little bit cold? And so it's a very interesting way to sort of think about leaders, think about people, think about where their tendencies are, and help pinpoint where they are and say, okay, now here's where you are. Where should you be?
Mm-hmm.
And so I've used this. I'm on the board of the school my kids go to. I've talked about it there. I've talked about this in the church context among our elders. Work all the time. Talk about this with friends. So I've used this in a load of conversations. And I just as recently as last week, I was drawing it on a napkin at a restaurant with a friend. So
when you draw, what are you drawing? A pie chart or something, or like a graph?
Let me find
I'm just picturing like a
no,
like a square, almost like urgent, not important, urgent, important.
Where is it? See, this is brand new, so I don't have it marked.
You don't have the page flipped over.
There we go. That is one of them.
And I'm assuming
this is where the editing will happen, I suppose.
No.
Okay,
Space
so
to breathe is fine, man.
Yeah. So this is some of it.
Okay.
And if you had a whiteboard, I would draw the whole thing out. I've adopted or adapted some of this into like almost a cross or a plus sign.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you imagine the plus sign right here, if you've got warmth at the top, so call that north. You've got, see, this would be east for you right here, right?
Yep.
And so if you've got strength here, so this quadrant is where you want to be, right? So strength,
strong and warm,
and warmth right here.
Yep.
But if this is warmth, that means being cold is over on this side.
Yes.
So that means there's a cold, strong quadrant up here.
Yep.
And so if you think about what those quadrants would begin to look like, then you start to think about who you are, say, in your marriage versus who you are in your work.
Mm-hmm.
Who you are as a leader around some people, but maybe not different people. It's a very interesting diagnostic.
It is interesting. Yeah,
it's a fascinating book.
And I'm assuming part of the premise of the book is that now that you're aware, you can change, or is it now that you're aware, you just need to have other people around you to complement?
So the book is not overly prescriptive, which I kind of appreciate. It's more just saying, here are things you can consider, and if you do this, you should know it's going to probably be perceived in this way.
Yeah. Okay.
Even down to how people present themselves visually in their attire. There's a whole section in there about women. We're sorry, but this is just how the world will view you in certain situations. So what do you want to do about that? So it's more of holding up mirrors and saying, here is what you are looking at in this mirror.
Yeah.
Now you can decide what you want to do with this information.
Yeah. I love books like that. That's fascinating. I'll give you a book recommendation if you haven't already read it, The Psychopath Test. Have you read it?
I have not read that.
Holy cow, it's so hard to put down.
Did you pass?
I'm still reading the book.
Did he pass?
I haven't taken the test yet.
Okay.
But the author is, I think it's Ron Johnson. He wrote Men Who Stare at Goats, which I know is a movie, but apparently it was first a book. And I mean, honestly, he might be my favorite author.
Okay.
Yet. I mean, this book.
All right.
It's like reading downhill. Every time you pick up the book and start reading, you just can't put it down. It's fascinating the way he writes. I don't have it for you. Sorry about that. But thank you for this book. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you
thanks
bet.
for bringing that one too. And thanks for coming on the podcast, man. What else, Bill?
Oh, I think
we've
gotten into all sorts of things.
What do you think about when you're trying to get to sleep? And I mean, you've got kids and you're involved at school and you're involved at church. You're running a business with where the world's at. It's 2020. We had COVID. We have COVID. We have all these things going on. Like, what's on your radar? If you're concerned about something, in the last 12 months, say, what are those things?
It's hyper-local. It's in my immediate vicinity. It's in my house. It's in my church. It's in the school that my kids go to, or it's in my business or my family. I mean, so it's, those are where we can affect the most change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't want to get twisted off into what may be going on nationally or internationally. I feel the need to be aware, have some thoughts about it, and at least be wrestling through some thoughts about it. You know, if you aren't sure what to think about something. But at the end of the day, I've got 4 kids that are going to go to sleep in my house tonight. I've got a wife who needs me to tell her that I love her and that that we're gonna be okay despite whatever may be going on. And I've got responsibilities with 35 to 40 employees who need me to make good decisions so that we all have jobs this time next year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm one of 9 elders at my church. So I want to make good decisions with those guys, and we need to make sure that we're being faithful to the roles that we have. I'm one of 7 or 8 members on the board at the school. And you make sure that we're making good decisions for the future and growth of this little school. So those are things I have a direct hand on that I can directly influence. In addition to all my friendships and my family relationships and all that. So, so to the question of what am I thinking about at night, it's going to probably be in one of those categories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a sign of a responsible, busy, dependable wise man, and they're usually pretty busy.
Yeah, I think about an hour ago, you asked me what else I do with my time, or like what do I do? We were talking about dreams and like where do you spend time, or you kind of started maybe down this path of what do you spend time on, and when your dreams are maybe put on the side or whatever. Like I don't have time for a lot of other stuff. I mean, it's like it's family, it's work, it's church, it's this school. Man, if I could get a workout in, that would be nice. I should do that more. I'd like to read some too. You know, so I mean, you got to have time to read some books, make sure, and then give all the people who need time.
Yeah.
So I don't feel good about playing golf in this stage of life.
Sure. Yeah, I can appreciate that.
I can't get behind that right now.
Yep. That makes total sense. Anything else you want to talk about?
Nah, I think that's it. I think we've done it all.
Bill Seaver, thanks
you
for coming by, man.
All
Really
right.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Oh, let me get a picture of you quick, and we'll get you out of here.